We begin this morning at the Supreme Court. Justices are there right now, just moments away from hearing arguments on the legality of an executive order aimed at ending birthright citizenship. President Trump is going to be there in person. He is seeking to prevent children of undocumented immigrants or anyone else temporarily in the U.S. from automatically becoming American citizens. Opponents say the president's executive order violates the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment. And joining us now is CBS News legal contributor and Loyola Law School professor, Jessica Levinson from Los Angeles. All right, Jessica, tell us why. I mean, we know the bare bones, but why is this such a high-stakes case?
Well, I think in part because of all the practical implications of this case. Obviously, if we change our definition of birthright citizenship and the citizenship of a good number of people who are born on U.S. soil is called into question, that's going to have all sorts of very real and important consequences. I think in part because it also divides our opinions. Do we think birthright citizenship is a good idea or a bad idea? And in fact, the Supreme Court case has nothing to do with that second thing I just mentioned. Is this good policy? The case is all about looking at, as you just mentioned, the 14th Amendment obviously became part of our Constitution after the Civil Rights era, after the Civil War. It was a post-Reconstruction era amendment. And it says, if you're born on U.S. soil, and there we see on the country that key language, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof, then you are a citizen of this country. We're going to hear, my guess is, well over 2 hours of oral arguments this morning that all focus on what does it mean to be subject to the jurisdiction thereof.
And Jessica, break down what you expect to hear from both sides' lawyers.
So when it comes to those challenging President Trump's executive order, I think what they're going to say is the language of the 14th Amendment is clear. Our understanding of what that language meant is clear. It was designed to say for former slaves, for people whose parents were former slaves, it was designed to say it does not matter what the status of your parents were. It does not matter if your parents were brought to this country illegally. It doesn't matter if they were formerly slaves. What matters is that you were born in this country. You enjoy full citizenship, full stop. I think when it comes to those challenging the executive order, they're also going to point to an 1898 case that indicates exactly that understanding, that we don't look at the status of your parents. We look at whether or not you were born on U.S. soil for a small carve out for the children of foreign diplomats. I think for the Trump administration, what they will say is that, in fact, that's an overinterpretation of the 14th Amendment, and that subject to the jurisdiction thereof actually means something akin to political allegiance. They're going to point to some other cases dealing with the rights of people who were born on tribal lands to try and say that our understanding of birthright citizenship, frankly, for over 100 years, that it's wrong and it's narrower than we thought.
This is historic for multiple reasons, Jessica. Obviously, an historic possible decision is coming up about an important amendment, but also because this is the first time that we understand in history that a sitting U.S. president will attend the proceedings himself. This is a conservative majority court. Do you think that this could possibly tip the scales? And is the president's presence intended, perhaps, do you think, to tip the scales?
I'm so glad you asked this question. So why is this a historic first? It's a historic first because, in part, presidents, even though they obviously have huge cases before the court where arguably their presidencies almost rise and fall on some of these cases, they've said there's a separation of powers and the head of the executive branch should not be in there hearing oral arguments by the top of the judicial branch. Now, when it comes to will his presence make a difference, I love this question because I think we tend to say President Trump appointed a majority of the court. These are conservative jurists. Will they vote with him? Will it make a difference if he's in the room? And I think the legal question is completely separate from that. The legal question here is, look at the 14th Amendment, look at the time it was ratified. What do those words mean? What is our historic understanding? This is a court of originalists, largely. And I think the original interpretation of the 14th Amendment leans heavily against President Trump's views here. And so I don't think his presence will ultimately make a difference for the court's decision. And I'm going to say, I think this could be 8-1, 7-2, maybe even 9-0 against the executive order.
And Jessica, we understand the arguments actually just got underway. If the president does win this case, I know you think that it's not going to happen, but if it does, what will that mean for the 14th Amendment? Will there be a change to the amendment, or does this just apply to the interpretation of the amendment?
Oh, great question. It applies to the interpretation of the amendment. So we wouldn't go back in and rewrite the amendment. What we would do is change our understanding of what certain words mean. And this happens a lot when it comes to Supreme Court cases. The 14th Amendment also has a word liberty. And we used to understand that liberty protected a lot of so-called unenumerated rights. For instance, one of those rights previously was abortion. When the court came out with its Dobbs decision that we all got to talk about a few years ago, we decided that that word liberty no longer protected the right to obtain an abortion. What does that mean? It just means liberty has a new meaning under the court's view.
All right, the Constitution in the eye of the beholder. Thank you so much. Jessica Levinson, we appreciate your time and analysis. CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joins us now. Weijia, we understand that oral arguments just began. We know the president is planning to be there in person. What do we think his intention is here? What are you hearing from folks in D.C.?
We understand that the president is there. We watched him leave here from the White House just a short time ago and motorcade over to the Supreme Court, which is just a few minutes away. And I think it really shows how important this case is to President Trump. He signed the executive order to end birthright citizenship on day one. It's something that he's talked about for several years. And even though, the tariffs case, as an example, was the centerpiece of his economic policy, he didn't go listen to those oral arguments. So the fact that he is here today, again, shows how much this means to the president. And it's interesting that you asked what he hopes to achieve by doing that, because typically presidents have never done this, because they want to maintain that complete separation between the branches and don't want to even appear like they're trying to sway the court. But this president has made very clear he believes that especially conservative justices who he appointed should be voting along with what his agenda is. And so on the flip side of that, in multiple cases, including the tariffs case, they did not do that. They pride themselves on their independence. So as Jessica said, it's unlikely that his presence will sway their, taking in of this case. But certainly the president wants to make a point. He wants to show why this matters. And in recent days, all week, he has been posting about rich people from other countries, especially from China, coming to America to give birth so that their children will have American citizenship. And he's been really railing about that. But that's such a small section of the greater population of people that would be impacted here. So we'll watch closely what else the president says and posts about today. And it'll be interesting to see how he interprets these oral arguments, which before he has only listened to off campus.
Obviously, this is a big day for the president, not just the Supreme Court hearing and arguments, but also he's got a big address coming up tonight. The president claims Iran's president wants a ceasefire. What do we know about this? And how do you think that this might factor into the president's address tonight?
I think that he's trying to set the stage here, Matt, for this primetime address scheduled for 9:00 p.m. Now, of course, presidents do not make these speeches during that time of day unless they really believe they have something critical they have to communicate to the American people. You're seeing his latest tweet that you mentioned just now on your screen. He said that Iran's new regime president has asked for a ceasefire. And he went on to say that when the Strait of Hormuz is open, that could be considered. But until then, they will continue the bombing campaign, which is a total departure from what we heard just a couple days ago from the White House when they told us that reopening the strait has never been a core objective or a requirement to end the war. So now you're hearing from President Trump. I think clearly he is looking for an off-ramp. He wants to wrap this up, but he has to be able to really make clear what the U.S. has achieved. And short of declaring victory or wrapping it up tonight, he has to communicate why we're still there and when this plan to end it will actually take effect. Just yesterday, he said it would likely take another 2 to 3 weeks. That's already over the original timeline he himself set. So he has to explain to the American people tonight why, and also what's at stake, and also in the meantime what he's going to do, especially about the economy, guys, because obviously as this goes on, we here at home continue to see those gas prices soar well above $4 on average today.
And for any sort of ceasefire, there needs to be a partner. We don't know who that partner is at this point or what they're actually pushing for on the Iranian side. Hopefully there's some more clarity tonight. As always, Weijia Jiang, you brought us some clarity, so thank you. And of course, we will bring you the president's speech tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern.